Okay, welcome. Today I wanted to offer a reflection about personal experience. About 20 years this week is how long I've stopped basically drinking and taking recreational drugs. So 20 years sober, essentially. So that's what I'd like to share today, and also talk about some of the tools, how, what are the things that have helped me in my recovery, and also talking about how addictions link in with trauma and some of Gabor Mate's work there. So enjoy. Okay, so so this week, I think it was Monday was the anniversary of the last time that I had a drink. I think it was the 12th or the 13th of February 2002. And the reason I know this so clearly is I was just about to set off to visit a Buddhist monastery, and I knew while I was there that I wouldn't be drinking or taking drugs. And I remember I was having a pint. My sister was leaving to go travelling, and I remember having a pint. It was in my local town, Gosport, down in Hampshire, and it was in the local Chinese restaurant. And that was the last time I had a drink. So that was 20 years before. So I came from an alcoholic family. So my father was alcoholic, and he'd had cirrhosis of the liver when I was 5. So spent a year in and out of hospital. And I began drinking age 13, and I would drink most weeks. And certainly when I would drink, I would always go to the extreme of basically, it was only until my late teens that I managed to learn how to drink without vomiting every time. Then when I was 18, started to do recreational drugs, and that went on until I was about 26. And there was a period of about a year when I was living in Africa, 2001, where I drank a lot, and I wasn't sure if it was malaria, whether it was some other sickness, but essentially I figured it might well be alcohol poisoning. At the end of the year, I was just kind of vomiting solidly for a day or so, so I had to go to hospital. So yeah, essentially my relationship with alcohol has not been wonderful. So it's kind of a real wow. It's 20 years now. So today I wanted to share, well, how did I really do it? So before I do, I'll also share tomorrow I'm interviewing a guy who's also had struggles with addictions, a man called Michael Maisie, who's the author of the bestseller A Young Offender, which is, I think, number 2 in his category on Amazon. So, and we're going to be talking about some of his story, crime, being in a young offenders prison, but also his addictions and how he's kind of moved through them. But essentially, there's this correlation now that Gabor Mate talks about between trauma and addiction. Him saying if you see someone who's addicted, he doesn't see that they have a problem. It's more that they need help. They've had some form of trauma. And linking that into the ACEs, which is the adverse childhood experiences, finding, and they talk about this in the film The Wisdom of Trauma, which stars Gabor Mate, this thing that there's a correlation between the more trauma you've had as a child, the more likely you are to reperpetrate that trauma. So going into crime, having addictions, and violence as well, things like depression. So for me, how did I, what did I do? So essentially I went to this monastery, and I think, I wasn't an addict, as in I just didn't have a very healthy relationship to drink or to drugs. So when I got to the monastery, there was no drink. And it was a relief for me on one level. It was like, finally, I don't have to have alcohol. I don't have to have drugs. I only went for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, I decided to stay. I decided to commit for a year. Then after a year, commit for 2 years, and 2 for 3, and it went on and on. So, if I'd known that that's the last time he ever had a drink, I wouldn't have gone to the monastery. I wouldn't have gone if I knew I had to stay for 3.5 years. So I think for me, this would be one of the keys of the how we give up addiction is with support. Michael Maisie, in his book, Young Offender, he talks about this. One of his ways was using the 12-step program. And I've heard this over and over again from different people, that's one of the best ways of giving up addictions, is especially alcohol, is using the 12 steps. And he's found that, to be transformative. He was he had a real struggle with alcohol. So that would be the first thing, is getting support. So for me, it was being in a supportive network, supportive environment. No one was drinking. No one was taking drugs. There was no access to it. I couldn't drive. So if I wanted to drink, I'd have to take a long journey. And it just wasn't in my consciousness. I think partly from boarding school, that, I'd said I won't drink, and therefore that was the rule. I'm not going to break the rule. I was very much in that mindset. So I think that would be the first thing, support. The second thing, is, I think, in these 20 years, I have, every now and again, I've had this urge to have a smoke or urge to have a drink. And what I've done is often meditated on, what was I like when I was drinking? What was it like to lie in my own vomit? What was it like to be the way I was? I wasn't necessarily an aggressive or violent drunk. I was what you would call a depressive drunk. I would sit on my own and I would drink maybe bottles of whiskey or, in my room, and write poetry. I was more of an inward drunk. But I became very depressed with that and suicidal. So that would be, one of the things that I have done when I've had that, I fancy a drink, is just to feel, what did it feel, the hangover? Oh yeah, that was this guy. What was it like to lie in my own vomit? It's like, okay, no, it wasn't so good. So that would be another reflection. If there is something, you want to give up with, and many ex-boarders, many people with trauma, have addictions. And this is, it's no big deal. It's like, okay, I just begin again. So that would be the third thing then, is if you do mess up, rather than hitting ourselves with a hammer, use a magnifying glass. Right, how could I do this differently? Right, okay, maybe I don't go to a pub. Maybe I don't hang out with those people anymore. And that can be a challenging thing. And I'd say that would be the fourth thing. I was traveling in 1993, and I met 1993, 94 in Australia, and I met this guy, and he didn't drink and he didn't smoke. And I was like, oh, that's intriguing, because I did both. And I asked him, well, how did you give up? And he says, well, I gave up drinking. I changed all my friends. And then he said, then later on, when I gave up smoking marijuana, I gave up all my friends again. I had to find new friends. And often, obviously in the monastery, I did that. I, let go of my old friends, and the people I kind of met in the monastery, they didn't drink, they didn't smoke or take recreational drugs. So that was something which really helped. So that would be the fourth thing, really, is looking at your friends. Are you around friends who will really support you? And that would be kind of coming back to the first one with having a support network like AA or the 12-step. Also looking at your close friends, and Michael Maisie talks about this, that his girlfriend from when he was an addict, when he started to give up, she was still going out drinking. She was still bringing people around. He found it really, really hard bringing around who were drinking. And he just said at one point, I need to make a break from you, because she wasn't willing to give up her drinking to support him. So they split up. And then the fifth thing for me would be about doing your inner work. It's like and that's really quite a big part of the 12-step, is looking within. Healing that trauma that Gabor Mate says. It's like heal that inner trauma. And through my work, I'd use EFT, doing inner child work, the shadow work. So it's like we explore our inner world. It's like, right, okay, healing, bringing resolution. And when we do that, therefore, we don't have the need for the drink or the drugs as much now. So I'd say a combination of those 5 things have really, really supported me. Any questions, please do let me know. I realise this video is slightly longer. But yeah, thank you for your support. So I'm interviewing Michael tomorrow, and it will go up probably on Friday. So I really would recommend you listen to it. He's a fascinating man from what I've read in his book and the brief talks we've had via email. And really kind of profound challenges that he's been through, and just showing you can go through these challenges and come out the other side. So if you have questions for him, please do leave them below. I'm interviewing him tomorrow morning, so before then would be great. Okay, next week on the podcast I've got Michael Boyle, who's a mythopoetic, kind of does shadow work but also works with the archetypes, part of the Mankind Project. And then the week after I'm speaking to Bruce Parry, who is from the BBC's Tribe and Arctic. So we've got some exciting people coming up. So yeah, more or less booked up for the next few months. So that's exciting. So, okay, well, many blessings and have a great week.